You're not from the U.S. originally, if I recall.
No, from Bosnia, as I'm sure, yeah, I've mentioned it
Yeah.
obviously in my writing. So I came here in 96, emigrated, so
Cool.
been here for a while, a long time. And really came to Buffalo, so I've stayed here. I didn't really go anywhere else except for University of Chicago, to get
Oh,
my,
you're in Buffalo. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
A friend of mine went to University of Rochester, and I visited
Oh,
him
okay.
a couple times. I made sure to come out and see him in the dead of winter, when no one wanted to come visit. But it was exciting for me because if you're from California, unless you live up in the mountains by Tahoe or something, snow is pretty exotic. So I wanted to go during the winter. It was interesting for me. Okay, so
So
yeah, you.
basically, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I was gonna try pivoting to discussion of movies and whatnot. Um, I know that you had watched Social Dilemma and Cuties recently, two movies that
Right.
have been talked about, one with much more infamy than the other. Um, so yeah, do you have anything to? Is
Yeah,
I guess like
that was it.
Cuties. I understand that your take is not that it's just some kind of terrible approval of sexualization of children that has been painted as. Is that
No,
what you
no.
saw?
Yeah, that's what I saw. And actually, it's been a strange experience
Yeah.
because there were so many attacks after first and foremost, I mentioned something about cancel culture, right? Because I saw every conservative possible piling on this movie without, most of them, I would say, without having seen it. And I thought this
Yeah.
makes no sense, and I guess if you really want to cancel Netflix, literally cancel the subscription to Netflix, I don't see any, nothing obviously wrong with that if that's your choice. But there was this almost a leftist, um, uh, it was almost like a leftist strategy in trying to cancel the organization completely because of this. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what is making you cancel Netflix. It's been mostly a leftist ideology, actually, most of the stuff that's there. So I think that
Yeah.
there's plenty of other reasons, to do that. So in any case, it started out as that, this sort of cancel culture. And then I actually had to resubscribe to Netflix to watch the film because I couldn't, obviously, I wanted to write about it, but I couldn't without having watching it. So, and I didn't see any of that. I really was almost prepared to attack it. I was going to rip it apart. What a terrible movie it is. I'm thinking to myself, but it really wasn't. And as I said in my review, I think it's a nuanced film. And if there was at any point any, um, uh, worry that it might be truly exploiting children, of course I would write about it. Did you watch it?
I didn't watch that. It's almost like superstitious. I feel icky somehow watching it. But I would just say about I noticed in the cuties discussion, um, I heard some conservatives defending not having seen it because what they're saying is, just that the marketing collateral that Netflix put out, just the imagery itself is bad enough. You don't even need to know the context at all. And I thought that
Uh,
was that was somewhat odd because a lot of the well, see, I can't point to any individual that I can call out for being hypocritical in any way, but I remember a lot of the conservative discussion around, say, the N word in Huckleberry Finn, right? Some of the
right.
left say we need to cancel that book because of the N word, and the conservatives will say, no, you have to understand the context. It wasn't pro racism,
Right.
so they're making a look deeper, acknowledge and appreciate the context argument in one case, but then purely symbolic, superficial, imagery is the damage in another case. Right.
Right. And
And
actually the trailer was pretty bad. It was really misrepresented in my opinion because actually I remember seeing the trailer probably a month before it came out and
yeah,
um, maybe even 2 months. I don't know. It was one of those, lists on Netflix coming up kind of a thing. And I saw the poster, right? And I click on the trailer. The trailer was just absolutely awful because it presented it in a way that she's leaving religion for this incredibly enlightened, Western European girl power secular way. And the way the trailer was also presenting it as if the dance competition was the pinnacle of the film, right? That was really what what she finally is a free girl or something
Oh,
along those lines.
oh, I
And I
see.
remember
Yeah.
actually thinking, I'm totally disgusted by this. What is wrong with these people? I actually thought that. And so it
Yeah.
was simply sort of a dismissal. For me, it was a dismissal of the trailer, as in, I still didn't see sexualization in the sense that everybody did, to be honest with you. But at the same
No.
time, I thought it was just another ideological setup, nothing, no story at all, nothing really, no nuance, etc. So I understand actually of seeing something or even hearing about something and saying, you know what, I'm not interested. There are movies, plenty of movies like that I don't watch, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you do. Everybody does, right? But I think that, and I've had conversations with conservatives that said to me, you know, I appreciate your view. I'm still not going to watch the film, but I'm not going to give you a dissertation as to why this movie is bad. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that
Right. Yeah.
was the yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you're someone who calls himself conservative, who've had the conversation somehow land on your lap, you didn't go looking for it. That's fair enough. But then there are conservatives who are just denouncing it. I mean, they probably stop now because the moment is somewhat past. But for like a
Right.
week, it's just anti-cuties every day. So they have less of an excuse to be coming down so strongly without having watched it, and much less saying I'm not going to ever.
Right. And I mean, if
So
somebody says, for example, again, I'm not going to watch this, I'm not interested, the controversy is too weird, or the trailer looks bad, the movie looks bad, that's totally fine. But I think what was happening was that I
yeah,
was, I personally was mainly reacting to the fact that people are willing to take down something without really understanding what's it about. And also the fierceness that came with the hatred of this film was completely disproportionate to the film. It made no sense to me. But I think a lot of it has to do with COVID, to be honest with you. I think it was a disproportionate reaction. I also think that a lot of conservatives, rightly so, have had enough of leftist ideology in the arts. So I think that everything you look at, the movies, there's always something that has to do with leftism. You're just so sick and tired of it. So I think there was a little bit of that too. But the fierceness of the criticism, I think, and the really kind of bizarre, strange personal attacks on people who defended the film, like myself, I've never experienced something like that. I was called all kinds of names and put on all kinds of Twitter lists, whatever that means. So it was a very strange experience.
did you see the list? People actually said
Yeah,
there
there
was a
were
list.
apparently there are lists called pedophiles, people who are going to hell. It's something similar along these lines, and these notifications kept coming up that I've been
On the going
put
to
on
hell
those
list.
lists. And what was that?
I said I'd rather be on the going to hell list. The other
I
one.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was laughing at first. I was, I'm generally not. I don't write to provoke, but I guess this ended up provoking. But I also think that people didn't even read my review. I think the
Yeah.
problem here is that we are right now in America experiencing a culture that is not reflecting and deliberating, and I think that is a much bigger problem than whether you want to see cuties or not. It's irrelevant. But I think
Yeah.
that everybody's always jumping to that opinion, some kind of position without really thinking.
So I missed your explanation of what that had to do with COVID. That piqued my interest, and then there was the phone went up for a second. There was some kind of
Okay. So so I really think that people are fed up with that. I think that there's a lot of tension clearly in the country, and
yeah.
it's that sort of existential tension that's
Okay.
that's
Sort of
unspoken.
just
It's sort of, yeah, it's rumbling. It's always there because nobody can take this anymore. The political theater that's going on every day,
yeah.
and people just want to go about their lives. It's exhausting. This has exhausted everybody.
Yeah, I can see how, in a sense, one might resent as a conservative being forced to stay home, where you're going to watch even more Netflix, and then your daughter might be watching Cuties, right? I could see it's somewhat of a
Right.
tie-in. You know, I mean, the coronavirus has been a boon for companies like Netflix, for Amazon, and Google, and all of that, Facebook,
Yeah.
Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, probably too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're in a way. conservatives are probably revolting against what they think of as TikTok the movie. So yeah, but yeah, it's also just Cuties happen to be a stand-in for long simmering resentment of progressive domination of the arts.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I guess some people who are reacting to conservatives who are reacting to Cuties are somewhat missing the point. It's not their fault. I mean, you're speaking to the point that's being raised, but yeah, there is something going on in the back of the heads of certain conservative critics that really is just an instantiation of their long-term disdain for the kind of people who go to work at Netflix and who arrange business meetings with the people who are going to ultimately put Cuties onto that streaming platform. So that's really what it is.
Absolutely. No, and I agree. And also just representing or misrepresenting the film. I think there was obviously mostly that was that. I mean, Netflix is very smart. They know how to, I think they wanted to provoke a reaction like this. There's no doubt about it. And I've been sort of frustrated with it for a while now. I remember thinking, why am I subscribing to this anymore? I'm just wasting my money, But so I'm, as much as I disagreed with how people behaved, and it was really awful, I understand their frustrations because I'm there as well. Every single time I watch a film that has come out in the last, I don't know, 10 years or 5 years or whatever, every single time I'm watching it, I'm waiting for that, ideology, politics to kick in to tell me what a bad person I am for being a conservative. You're always waiting for it. So I certainly agree with that. It's exhausting because the art.
I was going to say, as a conservative, I could see them actually appreciating some sort of Netflix strategy of hoping to provoke a backlash or generate some sort of some sort of controversy. Negative controversy is redundant. Hoping to provoke some sort of controversy with their movie choice. But the conservatives never see Netflix doing that in a direction that favors them, right? I mean, a lot of controversy lately is controversial because it upsets left-wing sensibilities. Conservatives would actually welcome more social media or media-generated controversy if it helped them, but that's not the kind of controversy they usually see.
But I think really the problem here is the discourse is on such a low level. Because Twitter brings that out in people and they're just kind of going back and forth. And even when there's a possibility of a more meaningful conversation, it's expected that you are a set of particular political points and that you are an immovable entity from those points. So that, what that means is that if you are conservative, then you have to check this box and this box and that box. If you're a liberal, then the same thing, right? And then at that point, right, we're not able to really kind of deliberate and really kind of go, oh, wait. I mean, every single person has a particular set of principles, of course, that remain unchangeable. But this idea that I'm going to kind of fall into a cliche or cliched phrases about politics is, to me, it's very dull. It's very boring, because then you're not really having a conversation with anybody.
Yeah, there's some tension between wanting invigorating, novel discussion, but then also being a conservative, or to some degree, just even being someone who wants to see a certain politics enacted, right? So
right.
I actually tweeted about that recently, right? So a conversation will get boring long before anything is really done about the problem that the conversation is about. And so to fit that into conservative politics, if you really want to, put Netflix's feet to the fire and hold them accountable for Cuties and everything like that in society, you wouldn't stop talking about Cuties. But it has gotten boring talking about it, so it's time to move on, right? So there's a tension between political goals, being a political actor, and just being a sort of free-spirited liberal who wants novel discussion all the time, And when I say liberal, I mean like the big picture sense that,
Yeah. Right. I understand. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you watched Social Dilemma as well. I only watched it for about a half hour.
Okay.
And I was sort of put off. By the docudrama style. I don't really like that too much. Netflix has sort of cornered the market on that. They've been doing a lot of stuff like that. They have
have they? Okay.
show called Mars that has give you. I'm still making my peace with the docudrama style. I'm not sure if I'm watching a movie when that part is happening. I'm like, okay, let's run with that. Let's watch a movie. But then they go to interviewing Tristan Harris or Jaron Lanier, and I'm like, okay, let's make it a documentary. But that's somewhat orthogonal to the real politics of it, though. So, what do you think about the?
Yeah, I really, I was very fascinated. It was a little bit disjointed. I'll give you that, between the actors and the. At times it was a little bit clumsy, but it wasn't too bad. The transition between documentary and this sort of film. But I found it fascinating at the beginning how they were talking about what really goes on, right? And why the data is collected, how all the algorithms are really talking to each other and trying to keep you on the social media constantly. So that was very interesting. And for the most part, I think as they were talking, I expected for them to go into more philosophical questions of what it means to be a human being in the context of technology. And I think at some point, probably in the last half an hour for sure, it just devolved into leftist politics about climate change and presenting white supremacists as here the white supremacists, but then not really talking about Antifa, and it was clearly one-sided, which is, what you really want to tell them is that's the problem, guys. It's there's a bias in social media on top of everything else. So
that's so topical. That's sort of strange. It worked its way into the Antifa stuff. Worked its way into that docudrama. Climate change is something that's been around for a long time. I'm a little surprised they went there, though. It looks like I stopped watching it at the right time.
Well, I think that there was a kind of with many sort of almost like science-based, really. Well, what kind of science? But let's just say technical science-based liberals. I think you have this notion that the world is going to end. I mean, that's been sort of the climate change song. And if we don't do something, then, we will all go extinct and what have you. And it's a very actually self-centered way of looking at things. As much as I think they're trying to save the earth, they're, trying to say that the world's going to end as if with some sort of certainty is, to me, like the pinnacle of narcissism. Yes, let's take care of the planet. I'm with you, but this militant.
If the world's going to end, what's the point of taking care of the planet?
I guess so. Yeah. It's a kind of like this can't, this can't continue. Well, there's certain things that can't continue, absolutely. But I think every single time, I think the problem I have with it is the fact that they always think that people are static entities, right? So social media is not going to change, right? That's one thing they say, because why? Because people are going to keep taking this. Maybe they won't. Maybe they will just go somewhere else, or maybe they'll stop using it. You never know, It all depends what you use it for anyway.
That's weird. So toward the end of the Social Dilemma, they started getting into these topics: climate change, white supremacy, blah blah. That feels somewhat unrelated to the higher level problem of social media addiction, which is mechanical. It can be used to help the right or the left, right? That was
right. I think the conversation there, or the topic in the documentary, shifted from what power media has, right? Because everybody's on social media, and so what can media induce in people to do in real life? And I think that's a very good question. But ultimately, they just mentioned, they didn't mention certain leftist factions of a lot of this violence, a lot of this chaos. So, it just simply had a leftist bent. You just know it. Once you're in tune to it, you, even if it's not overt, you just know where it's going to go. And I know when I wrote my review, I didn't really focus on that much, but don't you always get disappointed? You like watching something and then boom, they just gotta kind of put leftist ideology in there, and you go, oh, why did you do that?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, people have different different tolerance levels for that. I guess the better the film or TV show is, you know, regardless of the politics, the more you're willing to tolerate some of that, you know. But it does seem like it's being shoehorned into everything, right? So there was a lot of progressive stuff, notions like shibboleths that are trendy right now. It feels like the more that they shoehorn that into a work of art, the more they don't even expect it to stand the test of time, because a lot of stuff could end up looking bad. You know, I feel like it's almost better as an artist to try to keep it more abstract. You know,
without
so
politics, you mean?
Yeah, there was a TV show based on the Stephen King story, The Mist, and that was on a few years ago. Yeah, and I watched the first episode, and they start smuggling in like these stereotypes of the douchebag, straight jock guy who's picking on a gay guy. They really made that front and center. It's not so much that doesn't happen. It's just that, you know, it's such well-worn territory that they've been. It's a drum they've been beating for many decades, and it's like there's no awareness now that it's gotten more complicated. Like if this were a work of art from 1985 that I was watching, it doesn't feel shoehorned in because it feels like it was a needed sort of perspective at that point. It was novel then, right? You know,
right.
Like, you know, how someone who's a little bit more effeminate in their style, who seems to be into the arts and intellectual stuff, is getting picked on by a jock. That kind of thing needed to be explored then. Hardly anyone had gone there, right? But you know, far out, it's just a trope that's just been done to death.
Right, and not to mention, of course, because it is a conservative issue, right? So you have an added problem there. I think what I always objected to films that only are ideological, and it's obvious, like you said, I couldn't agree with you more. It's obvious when it's only ideology. It's different if you have a character who is, let's say, to use your example, let's say he's gay and he's oppressed and he's, you know, or a woman, whatever, and it would be much more interesting if you got into the interiority of that person. What's really going through their minds, right? What fears, what desires, what confusions. To me, that's actually more interesting because even though the public policy, let's say, and the society has changed in the view of gays, if you want to say that that's progressive, right? The struggle, let's say, for somebody to truly, you know, accept that about themselves may still be there. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not against showing that, but when you're telling me that, you know, here's this set of ideological talking points, and like you said, it becomes a trope, and it becomes very boring because you're not exploring the person. You've just turned that person into a concept that you want to use.
Yeah, I've noticed that these bald-faced tropes tend to be used more often in less prestigious television. Like it'll be CBS, you know, or TNT or USA Network. HBO and Apple TV and you know, media outlets like that, they are just as full of liberals and progressives, if not more. But they also appreciate art that is more nuanced. So you'll see better takes coming from HBO than you would have some ABC series in my experience. Netflix used to be somewhat more high end. They didn't release so much stuff. They hadn't released so much. It was, you know, Orange is the New Black was kind of interesting at the time. You could call it progressive, but I thought it was still well done. House of Cards, Lilyhammer. These were smart shows, and now they're producing so much. They've started coming across like you know, another new FX show, you know.
Yeah, it really is. It has lost its. There were many. There were many good shows.